Tuscan hills above, like hunters mounted, with leopards and falcons, with hound and horn. That century heightens the realism without restating the aim. The walls of the Medici Chapel, under Gozzoli's legend of the same Epiphany, celebrate the bel vivere fiorentino. But that life is wider than Florence. Let us range Europe again with Dufay's C'est la face à pâle, Kyrie, about 1450, from Ghiberti's doors to Van der Weyden's Bruges, and back to the Tuscan complement. Perhaps the most lovable picture of all for innocence and observation is Baldovинetti's fresco of the Birth by a ruin on a limestone ledge over the Val d'Arno, which by such mixed techniques as Leonardo would pursue has almost faded off the wall. In this, as in everything, it speaks that Florence, quant'è bella giovinezza, che si fugge tuttavia. In late 15th century Flanders, two painters press in opposite directions toward the human consciousness of 1500. Van de Gogh's Death of the Virgin, painted not long before his own death of melancholia, invokes the darkening tessitura of Ockeghem, or of this Tinctoris, three-voiced Kyrie. Even an anonymous English poem projects such imploration. Suddenly afraid, half waking, half sleeping, and greatly dismayed, a woman sat weeping, with favor in her face far passing my reason, and of her sore weeping this was the unchasten. Her son in her lap lay, she said, slain by treason. If weeping might right be, it seemed then in season. Against the passionate realism of Van der Goes, Memling quietly enriches temporal celebration. So with the wreathing of sacred polyphony over the Europe of Josquin des Prés, as if in this martyrdom of Saint Ursula, the glow of figures, fabrics, reflecting armor, and background space continually voiced the overlapping delight of Pierre Delarue's six-part Holy, Holy, Holy. Yet all that earth praise flowers in the reliquary shrine of church containment. So the island harvest matures to high Renaissance, that 1500 point of balance, where a now conscious humanism serves the old absolute which still embraces it. In this Leonardo, Mary draws Christ back from the lamb of his sacrifice. Anne, the lap of prophecy on which she rests, smiles acceptance, and before a landscape which, as so often with Leonardo, exhibits the whole of earth history, mountains reared by the erosion that wears them down. Where else does tragic knowledge clothe itself in such shadowed smiles? For which the unrecorded Italian music would be Tromboncino's Lamentations. Botticelli was born only 7 years before Leonardo, grew up in the same Florence. His spring, with the equivocal thin smile of this Flora left, Roman goddess of flowers and of prostitution, was painted about 1478, when Leonardo was already exploring what would ripen to the 1510 Anne rite. And yet a single composer, Isaac, at the Florentine court, exhibits both modes. In his ballades, the poignant grace of Gothic, in his great Laurentian elegy, the converse mystery of fullness. The achievement of 1500 is the cultivation of Renaissance rich repose over a creed of judgment and the life of the world to come. Such the praise of folly urbanity, by which Erasmus outraged Luther. In music there is the frottala and lauda harmony of chord progression, reared on the heritage of the church modes. A homophony also cultivated by the Flemings, as here by Compere. With painting, that calm horizon extends from the north, Memling and David, to the Italy of Leonardo, Perugino, Luini, Giovanni Bellini, early Raphael, Giorgione. This Carpaccio dream of St. Ursula enshrines its Venetian style center. But the mutant of Gothic force Savonarola had sowed in Medici Florence would rise through Ursula's sleep of dreams. By 1530, that fruitful island of suspended values is yielding to an expansive struggle of new against old, the old enfleshed by the new, a tragic birth, where the physical and human modes of the modern are stretched in the whirl of medieval contempt of earth and timeless faith. In the flexing of Michelangelo, this pensive Lorenzo from the Medici tombs, in the always more conscious control of musical space, a swelling tiento by the Catalan villa, we enter the tensile phase of late Renaissance, a style which, with its dynamic sequel, strains under the name of mannerism. Of Florentine early mannerists, Pontormo most sensationally breaks with high Renaissance, twisting the nude penitence of Jerome, smiting his breast with a stone, into a manic war with its framed space and barren landscape ground. In music, the degree inflection by which Josquin, for expressive grief, had wrenched the modes, advances about 1540 through Willaert, to the passionate chromaticism of Vicentino or of this De Rore. Reformation disrupting the North, Counter-Reformation tightening the South. Under both, a confident and now aroused humanism, struggling in science, politics, philosophy, for freedom and the power to build. In this turmoil, every stress communicating itself through the cultural ambience to each point of expression, Europe rises to a might of creativity, as giant men are pressed up from the whirling mass, flesh of that hypostasis of spirit. Venice heads the 1560 shift from the tensile bow of Michelangelo toward El Greco's kinetic arrow. With Titian's great myths, with the Ricercare of Andrea, first of the Gabrieli, the tethered is unleashed. Though the unleashing brings on the dark of tragic storm. To tie this passion to its archetype, oppose from its Christ beginnings one of those mild crucifixion allusions in catacomb art with the Gregorian Tenebrae, of which we have heard the opening. How quiet even the voice leap of the dying cry, my God, the drop through diabolic tritone to acceptance, et inclinato capite. Place that against the embodied agony, the last Pietà by Titian from his 90s, with Ingegneri's mighty rhetoric of the Tenebrae. Those vast forces over the 1600 divide of Bruno, El Greco, King Lear, have only to set, as in Cartesian formulable array, to precipitate another style century, the 17th, billowed up on the conscious assertions of Baroque. To try to render figures expressive, said Bernini, I put myself in the same attitude that I want to give the figure. In him, in grandis o vos omnes, causal reason and vindicating will dramatize the incarnate passion. But no sooner has that world-shaping introspection appeared in Cartesian confidence than it casts the shadow of Pascalian doubt. Its cloud-capped towers and solipsistic self are vulnerable. The reason that exalted them may let them down. In the heroic axioms, as at the wings of a temporal stage, the future of Rococo mockery and romantic pain wait their cue. As Eliot says in Gerontion, history has many cunning passages, gives too late what's not believed in, or if still believed, in memory only, reconsidered passion. Again, around the century mark, now of 1700, the ever-present change of history sharpens toward another quantum break. The massive Baroque vindication of divine order yields to Rococo wit, sentiment, and lightened play. Art darkens in Magnasco like the satires of Swift. It lightens in the frescoes of De Ferrari in Genoa this autumn, or of Ricci in Florence, to the airy artifice of Tiepolo and the France of Louis XV, and already the concerti grossi of Alessandro Scarlatti, Domenico's father, this affettuoso close of the last, enter the courtly salon, where rational disillusion and heart's revolutionary hope would both be entertained. What has so nonplussed the 1760 empiricist David Hume? Is it the ruffled repletion of some Johnsonian meal? Or is this the moment recorded in the appendix of his treatise on human nature, when, having pursued through years and volumes a system based on simple atomistic perception, though one might have guessed perceptions are ingatherings already tinged with self and world, he discovered, true to the logic he had played, that he stood in contradiction, what Kant would call antinomy, no way having started with the disconnected to account for any composition, self or substance, even to the power to think or say, I am. If perceptions are distinct existences, no connections are discoverable. All my hopes vanish when I come to explain the principles that unite our successive perceptions in our thought or consciousness. For my part, I must plead the privilege of a skeptic and confess that this difficulty is too hard for my understanding. So the transcendental imperative would become what the spirits demand of Faust, to reconstitute the lost world within. Bauer sie wieder, in deinen Busen bauer sie auf. Thus Runge renews incarnation from imagination, nature, and romantic heart. Beethoven sublimes sacred polyphony in the C-sharp minor quartet. It is the aspiration which, through all 19th century thickening of the bourgeois and material, and even in Nietzschean complementarity with that, spirals from 1800 Beethoven to 1900 Schoenberg, from Runge and Friedrich to the cubistic, Orphic, and Blauer-Reiter dissolution of spatial things, as Goethe's cry of spirits, build it in inwardness, would take in our century the voice of Rilke. Is it not this you wished for, earth, to be reborn in us, invisible? Erde, ist es nicht dies, was du willst, unsichtbar in uns erstehen? Was it the resurrection of the God who had entered time and flesh? Or could the Incarnate himself foretell the countdown of that resurrection? As Yeats asks of Leda, so mastered by the brute blood of the air, did she put on his knowledge with his power before the indifferent beak could let her drop